What's up, folks? Justin Garcia, aka Master Chim here, and I'm going to do another video regarding Jordan Peterson's situation and the very much anticipated, expected, and thoroughly enjoyed attack of a lot of his sycophants um, on my other video where I talk about him being in rehab and, of course, you know, him being in rehab. Couple of things I want to talk about today regarding his situation in general. I want to get into some general points, and then I actually picked, I think, 9 or 10 comments from the comment section that I'm going to reply to. Now, I understand full well, and you should understand full well, the intent of this video is not to convert a Jordan Peterson sycophant into something else, like a man or a woman of their own independent thought. What I am trying to do, though, is give more information to those people that follow my information in general. Maybe even recruit a couple of people that are on the fence on a couple of these issues. I think it worth noting. I even made a point of saying this in my video when I was driving that I just made, on the fly. Jordan Peterson, I think, is a brilliant man. I think he is a well-intentioned man. I absolutely have a tremendous amount of respect for so much of his work. I do not dispute the fact in the least that he has helped, at this point, millions of people transform their lives. So what then is the issue? Why do I have a problem with Jordan Peterson? Well, I think that his situation in general is very common in today's society, whereby because somebody has an expertise in one thing, it is conflated to be an expertise and therefore a model for other things. There's a reason why society looks to celebrities for their, opinion on politics, their opinion on things like climate change and things of that nature. So when we look at Jordan Peterson, he is a master of a very specific group of information. He is somebody who is extremely articulate, extremely, and I'll say, well intended. I think the man is somebody who really feels that he wants to help people. I don't dispute that at all. However, where I'm concerned, and where my content usually sort of deals with. What it deals with are the deficiencies that men have and all of the problems that arise from those deficiencies. And in Jordan Peterson, I see a lot of those deficiencies present. This isn't the first time that I've mentioned this. I mentioned this, well over a year ago at this point. You could probably look at other videos that I made about Jordan Peterson. And in my private groups, I've been talking about this for some time now. Jordan Peterson took the world by storm. Like, I get it. I was listening to his debates and everything online like anybody else. And I was thoroughly impressed when he would talk about, things that, I take great interest in my own, life, my own development, my own climbing of the ladder. Things like, the representative archetypes of an individual's consciousness and, getting into sort of Jungian philosophy. And Jordan, he had this, this tremendous amount of information. If you have this like archive on YouTube of hundreds, if not thousands, I don't know, hours of just him teaching students at, the university that he worked at. I don't dispute his value. I don't dispute his intent. I don't dispute his expertise in the fields that, he is an expert in. But what I want to do is establish the acknowledgement of his deficiencies as a man. And again, this isn't a moral or ethical thing. The fact that he's, I would probably speculate, wholly unaware of his deficiencies, the ones that I'm going to articulate a little bit more in depth in this video, doesn't make him immoral, doesn't make him unethical. It does make him fraudulent, though. If he presents himself in a way that could be that could be interpreted as a model of behavior. The be like me narrative goes hand in hand with the level of expertise and fanfare that he's gotten, these last few years. he came out with a book and entitled it The 12 Rules for Life. He wants people to live according to what he prescribes as the best way of doing so. There is some hypocrisy there. There is some conflict there, some contradiction. And again, it doesn't speak to his intention, but it does speak to, I would say, the absolute fraudulent nature of his image, and therefore the legacy as it has been designed up until this point. Jordan Peterson, very valuable in some aspects, very deficient in others. And I think we conflate this. And, you look at the other video that I made when I was driving in my car a few days ago, and you look at the emotional responses that some of the commentators left. I don't blame women for being emotional. Women are emotional creatures, right? It's part of what makes them, so special and unique and valuable. It comes from their nurturing nature. I'll get in trouble for that somehow. But the men, oh man, what's going on with you guys? Yelling at me like I was, like I just beat up your boyfriend or something, or I was belittling, your favorite song, or your favorite, teen pop star, or like it's really a sign of the times, I guess. But let's get into the information. Before we do, here's a video that some of you guys may have not seen. A lot of, and I admit, a lot of the perspectives that I've had and the information I was sharing and opinions I was sharing in that last video was based on my understanding of who Jordan Peterson is in its entirety, which includes a lot of information that is not just reduced to his latest, rehab stint and whatnot. So before we continue, let's watch this 2-minute clip.
So I take a serotonin reuptake inhibitor, which is
SSRI.
Yes, it's like Prozac. I don't take Prozac, but it's similar to that. And I also take a drug called Wellbutrin. And Wellbutrin, in many ways, is a safer drug, and its primary purpose is to increase positive emotion rather than decreasing negative emotion. Mm-hmm. And I did well on the serotonin reuptake inhibitor alone, but the addition of the Wellbutrin was definitely put in something that was missing. And
so what does it do for you, Jordan? Does it like kind of bevel the edges on the harsher
when
emotions?
I first started to take it, which is a momentous decision for people, and especially for, I suppose, in some ways, someone like me, because of course I pride myself in some ways on having extremely tight control of my thoughts, for example. And even when I was very depressed, and I've been very depressed, I never had the cognitive portion of depression, which you think, if you're depressed cognitively, you think that the past was terrible and that the present is terrible and that the future is going to be even more terrible. And I knew I had a great life. I mean, I've always known I've had a great life. But it was hard to move, so it'd be like moving through molasses. That's annoying. That's called psychomotor slowing. And I have a lot of projects on the go, like the equivalent probably of 4 full-time jobs. And when I lose energy, like there's no way I can do that. That just goes. And that's real trouble, because if that goes for a couple of days, I'm in real trouble. When I took this antidepressant first, it was an indescribable relief. I mean, what happened was it kind of knocked me onto the couch for about 3 days. And I could feel muscles in my body relax that I know, I can still feel how it felt. It was such a relief. I could feel muscles in my body relax that probably hadn't relaxed for 15 years. And it was just, and to understand how that feels. And so that scares people sometimes if they take antidepressants, because they're afraid of the medication. And doing that to you is actually a good thing, because what's happening is your serotonin levels are going up, and when your serotonin levels go up, then your musculature can relax. You're not all tensed up and ready for the worst. And being like that for like 10 years is no joke. And so I thought, well, when I took the serotonin reuptake inhibitor, I thought, I will never stop taking this, ever.
And you have not?
No.
So, a couple things there. Number one, his workload, the equivalent of 4 full-time jobs. I'm somebody who coaches individuals on a whole assortment of topics. Most of them generally, looking to just improve themselves, their performance, eliminate deficiencies. And the one thing that I will say with Jordan Peterson, which is very much, if you guys have ever seen my bucket model series, I talk about, and Stoics talk about this, and have, for a lot longer than I've been around, the perception or the relationship with our environment, how we interpret the currency of emotion we assign to our circumstances plays a great deal in how they affect us. So when you say that you have a workload that is the equivalent of 4 full-time jobs, well, whose 4 full-time jobs? Like, whose jobs are you talking about? Are you talking about 4 university professors? Are you talking about 4 coal miners? 4, soldiers in a combat zone? It's irresponsible, inaccurate language, and it lends itself to a worldview or a relationship with his reality that you could see starts to create a disconnect that you would expect to become dysfunctional at some point. And the title of my last video, Jordan Peterson's in rehab, of course he is. It is on the tail end of having made these observations, and just allowing common sense and personal experience sort of interpret what it is that I'm seeing. But let's get to a couple of points that I want to make in this video. Point 1, anti-reality drugs are a reachable rung, right? So one of the things that I was getting flack for, and I think it's represented in some of the comments that I'm going to share later, is, you didn't even get the situation right. He wasn't on antidepressants. He was on anti-anxiety medications. Well, for a long time, I call all of these drugs anti-reality drugs. So antidepression, anti-anxiety, I understand there's a difference between the two of them. But you don't need to be a PhD in psychology. You don't need to be a psychiatrist to understand that all of these allow you to compensate for an inability or a deficiency in your ability to navigate your own reality. I am a firm believer that if the alternative to taking anti-reality drugs is suicide, or that's your perception, that's the reality as you see it, then you should absolutely take the anti-reality drugs. But I think it's very important, and you can look at this in business, in negotiation, in other relationship applications, alliance building strategies. At the onset of this strategy, we should understand what the mission of this tool is. Is it going to be a tool, or is it going to be a crutch? Now, I like to call things crutches that I need to add in order to bring me back to who I am, to bring me back to my full capabilities, full capacity of effectiveness of being me. Very similar, and I use the example, the analogy of breaking your leg and needing a crutch. When we get the crutch, it's with the full understanding that this is going to allow us to get to the point where we no longer need it, and we could discard it at that point and continue being who we were, somebody who doesn't need that crutch. A tool, however, allows us to do something that in our own natural state we're not capable of doing. So the thing is, we say, if using these anti-reality drugs as a tool is bad, well, why aren't tools themselves bad, if that's, the analogy that I'm drawing? What I will say is that we could look at the use of a tool, and it is allowing us to achieve a greater portion, or at a greater rate, the development of our individual mission. If I want to build a house, and instead of a hammer and a nail, which are tools themselves, but let's just say I want to use a nail gun, it is allowing me to move further along a path that I understand to be virtuous, productive, moral, ethical, climbing my individual ladder of personal development. It is in line with all the things that I know I should be striving to sort of achieve. However, if I'm using something that allows me to be somebody else, do something else, create something else that is not in line with all those aforementioned benefits, then it is something that I am never going to argue for its validity of. The fact that it just allows you to do something you couldn't do without it does not inherently make it useful, does not inherently make it beneficial. And this is the foundation of my position on a lot of drugs and, the Roganettes and their DMT obsessions and their acid, obsessions. And it's all based on this idea that, this experience is opening our mind to different levels of consciousness. Well, that's a very convenient story you're telling yourself for the effects of a hallucinogen or whatever other drug you're using to sort of escape reality. In this specific, back on point, in this specific application, if you're somebody who thinks they're going to kill themselves and you have a doctor, a friend, or your own research leads you to think that an anti-reality drug is going to help you not do that, then you should absolutely take it. And I've said this before. This isn't just a reaction, to a, to the vibe I got after that last video. I've been saying this for a long time. The reachable rung is a concept that I've been speaking about for years now. But true to the analogy, when we grab a rung on a ladder, we understand that, number one, it's going to help lift us up, but we also understand that eventually in the continued climb, we're going to let it go. Now, if the rung ahead of you is too high, it's out of reach, we create the rung that allows us to continue that ascent. And that's where these anti-reality drugs could come in. But they should be formatted, framed, defined as reachable rungs, not as these tools that are going to allow me to be myself. No, they're not a tool that allows you to be yourself, because being yourself is not dependent on any external source. So you can't, it's like the Bernie Sanders, healthcare is a human right. Well, our human rights are internal. Human rights speak on the relationship we have with our reality, our environment. It has nothing to do with, forcing, other people to do things for us. That's an entirely different, type of idea. So looking at these anti-reality drugs and in that video, you hear Jordan Peterson saying, well, I'm never going to get off of this. I'm always going to, when you hear that in the 12-step programs, you're always going to be an alcoholic. Well, bullshit. It's a very defeatist mindset, and it's arrogant on top of that. Not only is it weak, but it's arrogantly weak. How do you know you're always going to need it? How do you know that you're not going to discover new information, evolve into a different level of consciousness or a different level of strength, development, however you want to frame it, categorize it? How do you know that you're not going to reach that level and no longer need these drugs? Right? So a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Again, we talk about weak language, framing things that will eventually be dysfunctional, down the timeline. Well, this is, you hear Jordan Peterson talk, and for all of his positives, he has a lot of that weak language when it comes to his own situation, his own obstacles. All right? So anti-reality drugs are a reachable rung. Next, tribe matters. I cannot tell you enough how many times I have gotten into a situation where somebody needed some help, because they were sort of, just going off the deep end. A lot of self-destructive formulas at play, and I looked at their lives and I said, wait a minute, you have absolutely nobody around you to tell you that you are full of shit. You have nobody around you to remind you of what's going on in your blind spots, what's going on, as a result of your just inherent, biases, the things that we can't even see, the things that we don't even know are a problem with us. Who are the people around you that we have to have around us to let us know what's going on? A phrase that I use for my students all the time is our eyes are in front of our body. We don't have eyes behind us. So half of reality is always out of our vision. We rely on the interpretation of circumstances from people we trust to get a big picture, a full picture at least, on what exactly is going on, so we could sort of plan and react accordingly. I look at Jordan Peterson. Sure, he has a wife. He has a daughter. I don't know who his tribe is. I'm not saying he doesn't have one. But what I am saying is his situation is very, very common in those that do not. If you don't have a tribe, then you are limited to your own relationship with reality, which we all know as adults. Our states, right, our moods, they go up and down. How we see things, how we misinterpret things, how we assume things, the presuppositions that we walk around our lives carrying and not even realizing them. We need to have more information, right? And historically, people have gotten that through tribe. Does Jordan Peterson have a tribe? If he does, I don't see them, number one. And number two, they're doing a pretty shitty job. Number three, all pain is training. All pain is training. I've heard Jordan Peterson, and specifically the first time, this is the first sort of anomalous thing that I heard him say. He was on the Russell Brand podcast. And I don't think I'm going to get hit with a copyright strike for that other video clip, but I didn't want to start sharing other stuff because that's how it happens. My channel's already been demonetized, so who knows how long even this video is going to be up, right? But on the Russell Brand podcast, he had made a comment that, of course we want to, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, we want to end suffering. We want to end all suffering. Well, I want you guys out there to define to me the values or anything that we hold virtuous or valuable that did not come as a result of a process that was just riddled with suffering. It could be going on a diet to get healthier. It could be lifting weights. I'm a competitive power lifter. When I'm under a squat bar, it is a lot of things, and suffering is among them. When it comes to dealing with death, right? Specifically the Jordan Peterson situation, we could talk about this, but, last year, I buried my father, my younger brother, my mother and I, we buried my father. I have four small children that needed to sort of process what this meant. And there was a suffering that went along with that, but that suffering allowed them to be functional in their ability to deal with something that's completely natural, right? When we categorize pain, we paint it with this broad brush of a negative aspect of our lives. We wind up sabotaging our ability to navigate obstacles, because our ability comes from a growth that happens through processes that, like I said before, are riddled with pain, are riddled with suffering. All pain is training. Nietzsche said, one of Jordan Peterson's, favorite philosophers, whatever doesn't kill us makes us stronger, right? Conan, one of my favorite movies, starts with that quote. And he got it right. He got a lot of stuff right. That is one of them. If you're not dead, you're winning. That's just how it is. And all pain is training to continue to win. Next point. A spiritual man is never alone. Now, I will tell you right now, I believe that Jordan Peterson is an atheist. I believe he is an atheist because his relationship, although he has, I think, just a masterful academic's grasp of metaphor and representative symbology and looking at how our ancestors interpreted different elements of reality and the human condition in stories and these representations. Jordan Peterson, I think, is somebody who has just a tremendous grasp of the way that civilization unfolded, using those tools, doing those things. However, if somebody is a Christian, but cannot say he believes in Jesus, cannot say he believes in God, cannot say, when trying to be nailed down to the statement like, Jordan, just say, it's becoming a thing, Jordan, just say, I am a Christian, I believe in Jesus, I believe, and I'm not a Christian, right? But speaking to him, because he claims to be a Christian, the guy that refrains from saying that, I only have two possible explanations for that. Number one, it's just not true. He doesn't want to say it because it's not true. And down the line, that might be revealed, and he doesn't want to be the guy that contradicts himself, further looking like, he's misrepresented himself to the people who listen to him and worship him. Right? But the second reason is he doesn't want to disqualify any potential followers of his content. I'm not going to say customers to buy his book, to send him money, to pay for his talk. I'm not going to say that. I will just generally say he doesn't want to disqualify any followers. Which I think, whereas the first one, I think obviously is fraudulent. The second one, I think, is not only fraudulent, but it's unethical. If you're somebody who thinks you have a message that resonates with everybody on the planet, aren't you the fancy guy? Aren't you the smarty pants? Aren't you the guy that seems to have figured out what only gods in our stories have figured out? How to have messages that resonates with everybody. How to connect with people across every land, every culture, every belief system. It's a very, very arrogant position to take. So where that second point is, where he doesn't want to disqualify any followers, the two sort of subsets of that, the subcategories, is he's arrogant enough to think he has a message that's going to connect with everybody, which means he's defining his message by whether it's connecting with somebody, not on the merits of it itself, or he doesn't want to have people not buy his stuff. So he doesn't want to say the thing that's going to disqualify potential clients, potential customers. One of the things, if you guys have ever heard of Zig Ziglar, salesman, just incredible salesman, incredible personality. He passed a few years ago. I never got a chance to see him live, but he's like one of these mentors in my head, right, that I have. And he would always talk about his Christianity. He was from Texas. Christianity was a big component of his identity and his life, and he would always talk about it from the stage. And he wound up going around the world teaching his sales strategies and whatnot. Very much a beloved public speaker. And he was asked often about, well, why are you talking about Christianity? Don't you understand that some people are going to hear that and they're going to turn off the rest of your message? And he would say, yeah, I know that, and I understand that, and the problem would only arise if I didn't, if I wasn't aware of the people that turn off my message. But it's a price I'm willing to pay to share, my religion and to share who I am, to share something that's a very, very important part of who I am, and I commend Zig Ziglar for that. Again, I'm not a Christian. I'm not an atheist. But I commend somebody who has the commitment to his ideals to fully represent his identity publicly, right? And not to sort of hide behind any word games. So, these points are the real important thing that I wanted to share as a result of this. But I want to get into some comments. I got, I think, 10 comments. There's probably going to be a lot of overlap. One of the things with these comments, I didn't share any comments that were supportive. Those of you that commented on that first video and were supportive, I appreciate it, And I read just about every comment that was on there. I didn't read all the replies to the comments, but every first comment I definitely read, and I saw a lot of positive ones supporting me and my stuff, and I appreciate it. Those that were opposed, of which I have 10 comments as an example, and the comments are into the hundreds now. Those of you that are opposed, understand I am not anti-Jordan Peterson. So you and I are not on the other side of the battlefield where Jordan Peterson is concerned, but we're certainly on the other side of the battlefield where, when it comes to how we should be dealing with Jordan Peterson's life and situation realistically. And why am I commenting on it? Because of how much influence he has, because of how many people I know, people that I'm connected to, follow his information, and the tendency, is to sort of conflate, the expertise with, the happenstance. It's, why is Alyssa Milano commenting about fucking science, and like, why are these celebrities talking about immigration policy? This is what we allow ourselves to sort of become subjected to when we don't have these conversations where we call people on their shit. I'll be honest with you, Jordan Peterson, I would love to, this is never going to, I say never, pretty arrogant of me to say that, but chances are Jordan Peterson is never going to see this video. If he does, or if anybody sees this that knows him, let him know. You can come and hang out with me. I'll fix you. I'll get you back on track. I'll get you doing what you need to do. I'll get you off all the anti-reality medications. It's going to be a painful process. I'm going to put you on the Jordan Peterson version of the Wheel of Pain. You ever see that in Conan? He's pushing the wheel. And I'll tell you right now, Jordan, I will whip your ass into shape, and you'll be fine, and you'll be functional. You might not be that famous anymore. You might not make as much money as you were making. You might not have all the time you had before to think about how miserable existence is, and to think about, even though those times where maybe you're not feeling miserable, where you realize how everybody else is feeling miserable. I will say, as a disclaimer to my help, there's a good chance that you are not going to have time to do that, right? You're going to be too busy doing masculine, manly things, doing things that other men respect, that women admire, that your loved ones appreciate, and that transform you into the person that you are designed to be, not that you have spiraled into. Okay, so let's get into the comments. Right, this is the comic relief section of the video. And I got 10 of them. These aren't necessarily in order, and if you can't read them on screen, I will read them because I have this thing on a big monitor in front of me. All right, so this is BW. All your info is wrong. He went to rehab for clonazepam dependency, which is an anti-anxiety that can have fatal withdrawals. The point is to get off the drug without accidentally dying. It's not a recreational addiction. His wife has liver cancer, which is one reason he was prescribed it in the first place. So a lot of my commentary on these comments is going to overlap or reiterate some points that I've made before, but I'm just going to give it all of the attention and information it needs. So all my information is wrong? No, it's not. He went to rehab for a clonazepam dependency, which is an anti-anxiety that can have fatal withdrawal. So isn't that something? Your anxiety has gotten to the point where you're going to take a drug whose potential side effect is fatal. At some point, it's like, are you paying attention? Is this not making sense? Are you, is your camera a little too zoomed in on what the hell's going on? You have to, I just hit the camera. You have to find a way to add a little bit of logic and common sense to looking at these situations. It's not a dichotomy, in your relationship with somebody as complex as Jordan Peterson. It's not either you love him or you hate him. Like, I get it. You have a tremendous amount of respect for him. It doesn't mean that anybody that criticizes any aspect of who he is and what he's done and what he's doing means that they hate him. And it doesn't mean that you have to hate me, right? It's all basically invested emotion with no return, right? It's a bad investment of emotion. It's not worth it. I'm not going to change how I think. If you want to change how I think, give me some information and counter my points and let's have a discussion. But, you're not interested in it. And I'll be honest, to a great extent, I'm not interested in it either. I'm not here to sort of try and convert you guys into thinking like I'm thinking or into agreeing with me. It doesn't fucking matter. I don't give a fuck about you because I run out of fucks before I get to you. It's nothing personal. I don't wish harm on anybody because that's a bad investment, right? But if we are looking at a situation like Jordan Peterson's, I should be able to have an objective, point of view based on the observations, information, knowledge, and experiences that I've accumulated over my 44 years on Earth, right? The point is to get off the drug without accidentally dying. Okay, I get it. It's not a recreational drug, irrelevant. His wife has liver cancer, which is one reason he was prescribed in the first place. I agree. Now, listen, his wife having a cancer diagnosis, that is nothing to, I won't joke about it, right? I don't want to joke about it. It's nothing that should be joked about. It's a serious thing. I have a good friend of mine, and I'm not going to say her name, but if she's watching this, you know who you are. A few years ago, her mother, who I was very close to, fell ill and began the spiral, the descent into what eventually had her wind up in hospice. And, when all of this happened, what did my friend do? She went to work. She took care of her children. She was married. She had responsibilities. She wasn't able to not able, disputable. She didn't choose to pursue medication to help her navigate what she was going to do. Now, I get it, different strokes for different folks, but my point being, you cannot bring up the circumstance as if somehow that is an indisputable, argument for him being in that situation in the first place. I agree that he was so weak as an individual that when his wife got that diagnosis, he needed to turn to medication. Now, again, like weakness to me, and let me define that. I should have probably done that earlier in the video. Weakness to me is somebody not who is on a certain rung of their own personal development, because everybody's at a different point in their journey. It's somebody who refuses to climb. What's an example of somebody who refuses to climb? Somebody who says they're going to be on medication forever, right? Somebody who equates his workload with that of 4 other men. You know, these are the types of worldviews that, you know, right, he's trying to rationalize being the way he is. You know, being smart is a blessing and it's also a curse, you know, and he has the best of both of those sides of the coin. Let's go on to the next comment. But everyone that commented, I do appreciate your comment. KK Make. Oh man, this is a long one. He checked himself into rehab because he knows, as a clinical psychologist, that was the best course of action. It's funny how he didn't know anything leading up to that, though, right? He was prescribed. I don't disagree with it. I'm just saying, oh, well, that's kind of not what I'm talking about. By the way, you know, if I haven't made this point, you know, indirectly, let me be a little bit more direct. If he was experiencing any sort of paralyzing anxiety, listen, you go on the pill. You take what you got to take because it's the reachable rung, right? I'm not disputing his situation. You know, the recreational drug comment in the last comment, you know, I wasn't insinuating that he was doing this to get high. And, you know, a little, you know, side comment, we all know, just going on the information that was shared with us, you know, what's actually going on could be completely different, you know, so let's keep it within, you know, that sort of those parameters. He was prescribed the treatment from a professional. Isn't he a professional? No, I know he's not a psychiatrist. He's a psychologist, but you know, he seems to have a lot to say about different drugs and their effects on people's moods and hormones and whatnot. He was prescribed the treatment from a professional. Then after realizing he didn't need them anymore, he checked himself in because these meds are incredibly dangerous and addictive. So are you insinuating that when he went on the drugs, he knew he would be in rehab when he had to get off of them? Are you saying that there's an FDA-approved drug that the only way you can get off of it is to go into a rehabilitation center? I don't agree with that. He says, I don't see anything wrong here. Okay, that's an opinion. These medications are the result of years of study to try and help people that suffer. They aren't perfect, but they do work and won't be prescribed if they didn't work for that individual. For you to dismiss all these pills as unnecessary is incredibly ignorant. You don't need them, sir. Good for you, but there are many people that do. And again, I will say no. I think there are a lot of people who need pills. You know, Jonas Salk and fucking penicillin. Like, listen, pills help. You know, at different situations and different obstacles that we have as people. And to the individual who has, you know, these psychological bumps in the road, like, sure, it's the reachable rung. It's not my point. I'm not sitting here saying, listen, if you need anti-anxiety medication, you're a pussy. You know, like, no, clearly you are not strong enough to navigate the obstacles that are in front of you. I mean, it might be an uncomfortable thing to acknowledge, but I don't think that's disputable, right? If he was strong enough to deal with his situation, you know, he is the guy that says you should be, you know, as a man, you should strive to be the most responsible person at your father's funeral, right? His wife got a cancer diagnosis. Listen, I'm married. I love my wife. Been married 15 years. Love her to death. One of my favorite people in existence. If she got a cancer diagnosis, I can't sit here and say, listen, I'll be fine. You know, life, death, it's all part of it. Like, no, I'm not saying any of that. But what I am going to say is this is somebody who did not have enough strength, I'll just generally say, to navigate that situation without the assistance of anti-reality medication. Can't dispute that. Next. Resident Evil 9922. This man is an idiot. Been called worse. Jordan Peterson did not abuse a drug. He was prescribed a benzo for anxiety relief. Wife has cancer by his physician. Millions take Klonopin for a variety of reasons like anxiety or PTSD or epilepsy even. The man did not abuse it. He simply had severe withdrawal when trying to stop taking the medication. His doctor is at fault here. The doctor should have told Peterson that he needs to taper the medication, as cold turkey quitting can lead to seizures. Regardless, Dr. Peterson is a wonderful, smart human being. Nobody worships him. People just admire him greatly. So yeah, long story short, you, sir, are an idiot. Hence all the dislikes. Cheers. Well, at least you ended it positively, Resident Evil. His doctor is certainly at fault here, but a little bit of a fallacious point to say that, or to imply that only the doctor is at fault here. Obviously, he takes some responsibility for this as well. I don't even think he would argue with that, right? He played a role in the sequence of events that led him to being on these anxiety medications. His doctor didn't, hold him down and inject him with something or dram pills down his throat. No, it was an alliance that led to him being on this medication. So he certainly bears responsibility. You're saying in one sentence, this is a nice little sequence you have there. Nobody worships him. Nobody worships him. People just admire him greatly. So yeah, long story short, you, sir, are an idiot. It's like, come on, man. I never met Jordan Peterson. I happen to like Jordan Peterson. By the way, I would say 80% of my friends have more problems than Jordan Peterson has. And these are people I love, people I care about, people I deal with on a regular basis. I would say they have more problems in quantity, maybe not in depth of quality, but in quantity than Jordan Peterson. My criticism of Jordan Peterson isn't to somehow imply that I nor anybody that's around me is perfect. Quite the opposite. Let me be the first one to tell you. But he is somebody of great influence, whose brand, whose name is very significant, certainly, online. And I think it provides a great backdrop for a lot of the discussions that guys like me have with the things that are deficient in a lot of modern men, right? But I appreciate your comment. All right, next. Jeremy Tate. Where's your psychological degree, big guy? Also, he was prescribed medicine, which is a medicine that causes physical dependence. It's like, Jeremy, I appreciate the comment, but can you just read what you wrote there? Okay, where's my psychological degree? I don't have a psychology degree, if that's what you mean. But I don't think anything that I'm commenting on requires one. Also, he was prescribed a medicine, which is a medicine that causes physical dependence. Well, yeah, clearly, like, who the fuck is disputing that? It's like, yeah, I agree with you. He was prescribed a medicine that he is addicted to and needs to go to rehab to get off of it. Like, I get it, right? I get it. Thanks for the comment, Jeremy. Number 5. Did you put Peterson in the atheist camp? Have you seen his debates with Sam Harris, an actual atheist? Jordan Peterson is not an atheist, dude. If that's not what you were saying, then it wasn't made very clear. But if you are, then damn rude. You really have no idea who Jordan Peterson is. Well, I will acknowledge something. I watched my video again, at least twice. I did not do a great job articulating the example I was using as an atheist. The point I was making in that last video was even an atheist who has no relationship with a higher power can lead a functional life in other aspects that allows him to not have the same, to suffer the same psychological issues and obstacles that Jordan Peterson is. Now, I do happen to think Jordan Peterson is an atheist. Did I watch the debate with Sam Harris? Well, I watched his, I think, 2 podcast episodes plus a bunch of discussions. I've watched all of them. I thought, I was actually on Jordan Peterson's side of the whole truth debate. Very difficult subject to argue, and you'll find, people are just going to sort of vote for their party, if you will, when it comes to that. But I think there was a disconnect between Peterson and Harris's understanding and usefulness of what truth was. I think Peterson could have done a better job articulating it. I think Sam Harris has revealed himself for the sort of pompous academic know-it-all that he is. But yeah, I have seen this. I just, I don't look at the discussions with Sam Harris that he has. I look at those discussions where people ask him flat out, do you believe in Jesus? Do you think God exists? And when he says something like, well, I believe in act like he does, acting as if he did, that type of, ambiguous, babbling, is not the sign of somebody who has a relationship with a specific deity or religion. It's just it's a little curious, at a minimum. So do I put him in the atheist camp? I do, but my use of that example in the first video was really just to say people who say they're atheists can have lives that are functional enough that they don't have these issues. So, he is somebody who says he even has that, but he's still developing these issues. So obviously he is not leveraging that relationship enough. And I'm not saying that, listen, all you got to do is believe in God and you'll be good. I'm not saying that at all. But what I am saying is because of his ambiguity, because of, I'd say, deficiency in other areas of his life, he eventually led himself down a path that culminated, it's one of these perfect storm scenarios. His wife's cancer diagnosis and, his reaction to it, So, but thank you, Ryan, for your comment. Strangeosity. That's a pretty cool name. Strangeosity says, sometimes drugs are needed for life. You used the crutch example, but there are other examples that apply to the body as well. For example, glasses. Glasses are needed for life, unless you get LASIK. It's funny you put that in there. Sometimes drugs, even mind-altering drugs, are needed for life, like glasses. You can do things that might lessen the need for drugs, but that might not still be enough. I suspect Peterson is on the autism spectrum, and that in itself will leave you very prone to depression and anxiety. Sometimes it is just biology and you can't do a damn thing about it. Suffer horribly or take a drug. I agree with you. I really do. There's not much here that I don't completely agree with. But I will say there is room in the points that you are making to accommodate the statements and the positions that I've shared. You say you can do things that might lessen the need for drugs, but that might still not be enough. I agree. I would just counter that with Jordan Peterson's situation. I guess we'll never know because I have all these other examples of the mindset that led to the type of decision making and reaction to his situation that could also explain why he's in rehab or why he needed anti-anxiety medication. So I get what you're saying. I understand that, in a general sense, as our understanding of medicine and development and discovery of different, just ways to keep people alive and healthy, as that evolves, which it always will, right? There are going to be people who are alive now that would have been dead hundreds of years ago. Fucking Magic Johnson's still around, right? Like we're solving some shit. I get it. All that being said, if it was just that, then there wouldn't be any of this other sort of indicators of it possibly being more than that. And where Jordan Peterson is concerned, that is what I'm commenting on. I appreciate the comment. Levi Binning. Okay, I put this in here because in the first video, I said his wife's cancer addiction. I obviously fucking misspoke. I obviously meant diagnosis. But a bunch of people commented on that. It's like, come on, people. Like, what are we doing? Right? I was driving in my fucking car. One of my students at my academy was like, yeah, you probably should have just waited until you were in front of the... And I went, no, because I don't give a fuck. Like, if, like, the cancer addiction thing... And I'm not saying, Levi, you could just be busting my balls for all I know. But a bunch of people commented, it's not cancer addiction, asshole. Calling me low IQ and all this other shit. Like, oh, God. I misspoke. I did. I meant cancer diagnosis. El Lot Dog. Okay, El Lot Dog. Clinical depression is often caused by a chemical imbalance in the brain and not any external factors in a person's life. And wrong. First off, I remember getting thrown out of a psychology class in college, and just that particular lecture that day. And we were talking about mental illness, and the professor brought up the term chemical imbalance. And I asked, do we have the measurement, the actual amount, or the sort of, I guess, the parameters, the scale of what each hormone is supposed to be in order to be balanced? And he said, well, no. He said, we just know that through manipulating these hormones that, or with the, he used imbalance of these hormones, it'll be manifested in certain behaviors. So then I asked, well, looking at it from the opposite direction, isn't every behavior we have, represented by the hormones that correspond with it? Can't you say that every behavior that we have has a sort of relationship of the hormones in our body that produce it? Well, yeah. Well, then how can we say that we're imbalanced if we don't even know how much of a thing we're supposed to have? All you're telling me is that with different substances, you see different effects, different behaviors, different symptoms, the disappearance of symptoms, the manifestation of other symptoms. So you don't really know what the hell's going on with the hormones much at all in terms of amounts. I happen to, in my early 20s, I've worked in an outpatient clinic for the mentally ill, outpatient clinics at Bronx Psychiatric Center in the Bronx. And I got used to the terminology of the staff psychiatrist when somebody was, fucking jumping off the walls. Oh, they just changed his meds. They're trying to, it'll take a couple days for him to settle. Like, all of this, it was like, this is fucking witchcraft? Like, what do you mean you changed his meds and he should settle in a couple of days? Like, what the fuck are you people doing? It was then that I realized just how much, the medication and its effect is trial and error. You would expect that to be the case, but not that. Then if that is in fact the case, it's certainly not being represented as such. When I look at, different things that would be classified as mental illness, it's just the individual's dysfunctional or lack of ability of being functional in society that we're saying has an imbalance, right? It's why they give young boys fucking, Ritalin and Adderall, and they're trying to calm all these kids down. It's not because these kids have some sort of anomalous behavior when compared to how they're naturally supposed to act. It's the anomalous behavior in a comparison to their peers. Like, yes, rambunctious little boys, sit down and don't move and don't make any extra noise and don't fidget and stand in line and no, this is not, what you're asking for is not natural. So to say that this child has a focus issue or he has this issue or that issue, it's like you are really comparing symptoms, in that he's showing to the symptoms that are going to fit in this artificial aquarium that you've created in the first place. So when I hear it's a chemical imbalance, bullshit. It's a cop-out, right? Any behavior that somebody has is going to have a representation of hormones that coincide with it, right? Like, yes, every behavior could be interpreted in how it happens physically. That doesn't mean that we can't address the behavior itself. It doesn't mean that then we just have to tinker, with, first of all, creating this narrative that there's some sort of an imbalance. It's complete nonsense, right? We judge behaviors whether they are functional or dysfunctional, whether somebody can get on in life or they're never going to be able to do it. Obviously, there are extremes where, an individual can't even function, can't even, will wind up, walking into traffic, will wind up trying to eat a fucking knife, obviously there are situations where there's a lot less debate on this guy needs help, right? But when we start to get away from those extremes and start to deal with, people dealing with sadness, calling it depression, right? People dealing with, a natural rite of passage, like the passing of one's parents, and wind up completely dysfunctional. Like, that's an unnatural reaction to a very, very natural occurrence. And at some point, we have to look at how these people who are having these troubles are being dealt with and handled. What's the narrative that they're hearing from, all of the influences they have around them? Like, somebody passed away, you're really, really sad. Here, take this drug to feel better. Well, people are going to be dying, like, for the rest of your life. At some point, people develop the ability to be able to manage. How are we ever going to manage if the first reaction to something of this nature is to take a drug? I'm not saying that's Jordan Peterson's, first situation. I'm not saying this is the case with him, but what I'm saying in general, when we start talking about chemical imbalances and you put, there's no external factors in a person's life, like, that's so ridiculous. I'm not even going to discuss it. But thank you for your comment. Number 9. Oh, Alice. I think this is an emotional woman post. I don't know, but I'm going to read it anyway. Quickly, I know. Alice, come on, man. You're killing me. His wife had terminal liver disease, the liver cancer. She had serious complications from the surgeries. She almost died several times. He had to be put on an anti-anxiety medication to deal with the crushing reality of his wife. The love of his life was suffering in front of him, and there was nothing he could do to make it all go away. I'm going to pause there and point out to those who actually follow my stuff, these are the types of sentences and the type of negative narratives and weak language that I'm always talking about. He had to be put on anti-anxiety medication. No, he chose to be put on anti-anxiety medication with the crushing reality of his wife. Well, clearly it was crushing to him, but the reality is not crushing in and of itself at all. People deal with these situations on a regular basis. And I would say that the overwhelming majority of them are not crushed to a level of dysfunction. Certainly they have things that they need to work out in terms of stress, anxiety, grief, and whatnot, but people still have to show up and go to work the next day. The reality is his wife, the love of his life, was suffering in front of him, and there was nothing he could do to make it all go away. Yeah, I get it. He was stressed out because his wife had a cancer diagnosis. I do not mean to undervalue the magnitude of a loved one having a cancer diagnosis. What I am saying is it is completely understood that not everybody in his situation has to be on anti-anxiety medication. So there is something inherently unique or special about his situation, right? And it is that, that minority type reaction to his circumstances that I'm commenting on. He was put on clonazepam to cope with the anxiety. I know. This guy talking nonsense in his videos suggests that, okay, this guy, like, I'm right here. You could talk to me. Like, I hear you. This guy talking nonsense in his video suggests that Jordan can think his way out of his problems. Quite the contrary, Alice. I think he's thought his way into all of his problems. I do not think that he can think his way out of his problems. Is that redundant? But he's somebody that has painted a picture, written a story, where he is the victim. He is the sufferer. And I shared that clip earlier to sort of just create some sort of a timeline. This is not just about his wife's cancer diagnosis. This is about how Jordan sees his relationship, or man's relationship, with reality. And it's an abysmal one. I'm going to take this drug. I'm never going to get off of it. Well, that's fucked up. Because number one, you're telling yourself that it's impossible for you to get to the point where you can get off of it. And number two, you're going to stop trying to get off of it. If you tell yourself right now you're never going to get off of it, why would you even try to sort of fill in those gaps to where you no longer need that medication, right? It suggests that Jordan can think his way out of his problems, that he should just have sex and go expose himself to some sunshine. That will solve his crippling anxiety. It will certainly help. Getting laid on a sunny day never hurt anybody's feelings. Do us all a favor and actually do some research before speaking so ignorantly. I've done research. I don't think I would ever do enough to satisfy you, Alice. You obviously like hearing the sound of your voice more than articulating a thought. Quite the contrary. Despite my best efforts, I cannot get rid of this Bronx accent. And I think it is limiting me from a lot of voiceover work I could be doing. I think Jordan needs to learn to be a better man. Best of luck to him and his wife. I don't need pills to solve my problems. Well, listen, I understand. It's not something that some people think is polite to say. But I don't give a shit, really. Yeah, you say, oh, you're an invincible guy that never cried your entire life. Not at all. You've got all your emotions in check 24/7. Not at all. I've cried many times in my life. The last time I cried was after watching my daughter. I was laying down in bed, and I'm actually going to try and not get emotional while describing this. I was laying in bed, was exhausted, terrible day, and my daughter came in. She's 4 years old, and she said, "Daddy, are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah." Like the intuition of a 4-year-old little girl is just mind-boggling. And she said, "I'm going to rub your back, okay?" So I said, "Okay." So she rubbed my back for 10 seconds, and she took the blanket and put it over me, like tucked me in a little bit when she was done, and she said, "See, I'm trying not to get emotional talking about my daughter. Everybody thinks I'm this sociopath." And she said, "Well, I want you to rest and take it easy so you feel better, okay?" I said, "Thank you, beautiful. I appreciate it." She said, "Okay," and she left. And I sat there and I had tears in my eyes, just out of gratitude, really, just at how I think about all the things that I've done in my life, all the negative things I've done in my life, all the things that I'm like, fuck, man, yeah, I still owe on that one, And then I think about how just fortunate I am to have the reality that I do, and a guy like me, I'm invincible that never cried. Quite the opposite. I was sitting there with tears in my eyes, just with gratitude about that special moment I had with my 4-year-old daughter. Am I invincible? No. I talked about I was locked up as a teenager, having panic attacks, in the prison cell. I'm actually not at all invincible. I've never thought I was invincible. Which is why I work so hard to try and eliminate these deficiencies. So I'm not going to sort of fall to one of my deficiencies. I'm not going to fall to one of my undeveloped, components of who I am, my identity. I'm not going to allow a vice to destroy my legacy, to end my life. So quite the opposite. I'm, I've done a lot of work. I've made a lot of progress. I have a lot of codes, a lot of rituals. I've developed a culture in my home, in my circle of friends, and the tribes that I'm a member of. There's a certain standard of behavior that makes a harder man, and I'll be the first one to tell you, I benefited from it greatly. But who I am now is not who I was 10 years ago, was not who I was 10 years before that. Go back far enough. I was a maniac, super emotional, hothead, angry teenager running around the Bronx, hitting people over the head with fucking objects. I was not a good guy. I was not a nice guy. At no point did I think I was a bad guy, though. It was just my reaction. I didn't have the tools to be able to navigate the regular, stresses of life, but these tools, I accumulated and allowed me to continue my mission. Allowed me eventually to become strong enough that a lot of those tools fell by the wayside because they became components of who I am. So I'm not invincible. I've cried many times in my life. I don't have my emotions all in check 24/7. I have a whole video series called Second Step Strategies where I talk about those times where your emotions get away from you, how to make sure that you don't wind up sabotaging your mission, as a result of it. So Alice, I know you don't know me. I know, you are a huge fan of Jordan Peterson, and I don't hold any of this against you, but, little off base, right? But thank you for your comment. Final comment I have here. This is from Joseph. Wow, this was so cowardice, really. All right, I'm not going to be grammar Nazi. I fuck up grammar all the time. His wife had cancer and his daughter had a dietary issue. That's why he was on those different diets. But that really doesn't matter. I agree it doesn't matter because his wife having cancer and his daughter having a dietary issue does not require him to take medication. So, or to be on a different diet, right? So all of those things came because he was unable to navigate his life's obstacles. I'm not saying that it's not warranted or it's not valid or it's not even common. I'm not saying any of that. But don't say that, well, because the big thing, and I brought this up in the other video, he was on the anti-anxiety medication because his wife had cancer. No, that's not why he was on it. He was on it because when his wife was diagnosed with cancer, his reaction to that information led to a dysfunctional state that he needed to be medicated for, according to him and his doctor. It's not the cancer diagnosis. That doesn't automatically put somebody on anti-anxiety meds. It certainly was the cause of the chain of events, but who he is and what his choices were fall in between that cancer diagnosis and him being in rehab. He was the one that was making those decisions in between those two events. Look at you, you look fat as hell. I will say I've seen slimmer days. But, when people start calling me fat, it's like, oh, God. It's like, what are we doing now? I'm also happily married with 4 beautiful children. And I'm pretty physically capable, too, despite being fat as hell. So all things being said, it's like, oh, come on. It's like, what are you doing? He says, me being fat makes people suffer more than any drug addict. I don't know about that. I should probably weigh 225 pounds. I weigh 255, about 30 pounds overweight. Still train jiu-jitsu, a few times a week. Still lift weights a few times a week. Still, walk my dog 5-6 times a day. My wife and I have a very healthy relationship. Do we suffer more than any drug addict, being 30 pounds overweight? Well, I wouldn't say that. I have a uncle who died of AIDS. I have a couple of aunts and uncles who died from overdoses. I have a bunch of family members who, as a child growing up in my reality, had different relationships with substance abuse. So, and this isn't towards you, Joseph, with your adorable little pink avatar. This isn't just towards you. You don't know me. But all the other people that this information might be relevant for, or maybe need this little piece of the puzzle. When I talk about addiction and drug abuse and all these different things, please don't think I'm speaking out of theory. Like I've sat down and thought all these things through and I've got it all figured out. I come from a background, a family, and a childhood that was riddled with drug abuse, right? Riddled with all of the psychological deficiencies that led people to choose drugs, right? So I don't speak, like some fucking academic that's never lived a day in his life, okay? So those are just 10 random comments. I'm not going to make this video any longer than it is. I appreciate it. If you watch this far, I appreciate it. I can get, a little talky at times. So if you're watching, we're well over an hour. If you're still watching this, I appreciate you investing the time. I'm not somebody who claims to be perfect. And Jordan Peterson doesn't claim to be perfect either, but he's fucking up. And when he's fucking up, he should be called on how he's fucking up. His information that's valuable, it's still valuable. But he himself as a model of behavior, it's like we need to be able to make the distinction between the man and his ideas and understand that if you're somebody who worships Jordan Peterson, and although one of the commenters said that nobody worships Jordan Peterson, I think if you'll take a gander at the comments of my last video, and I'm sure of this video eventually, you will see quite the opposite. You'll see a lot of people becoming emotional with a stranger while defending another stranger. All those people commenting, they have their own wives, husbands, kids, coworkers, friends, their own struggles psychologically, their own struggles physically. They have all this work they should be doing to climb their ladder. But here they are having an imaginary conflict amongst two strangers. It's not an investment worthwhile. All right. But I do appreciate you guys watching. Those of you guys that have been supporting me from the beginning, I appreciate and I'm grateful for every single one of you. Like this, share, comment, do all that stuff. I'm demonetized. If you want to support the Pressure Project, you can go and donate. But by the way, I make next to nothing from any of this content. I'm not monetized on YouTube. My Patreon, I think I have 125 patrons. I don't think I've ever had somebody just send me money just for the sake of sending me money. But I do it because other people do it, and I'm supporting that culture of alternative points of view and alternative thinkers, being self-sufficient and disconnecting themselves from all the people that are trying to control us and the narratives in which we live. All right? I appreciate you guys. And as always, brothers and sisters, pressure to power.